Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for what I believe is a very important conversation. The theme this month for the Café is systems. And one of the most important systems, ecosystem, currently as it relates to economic development in particular is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so I'm so glad today to have some dear people on the line to have us have this conversation. Ann Turner is a legendary hairstylist in the Philadelphia community, has been really navigating the space out in West Philly, especially during this time of COVID and connecting the hairstylist and barber community and even other businesses along the 60th Street corridor during this time and keeping them engaged and supportive and encouraged. So I'm glad to have Ann on the call today. And then I have what I really consider just a guru, a mentor from Philadelphia, from the Black News, EARL Harvey of I Buy Black. He's a founding member of the I Buy Black community, so I'm glad to have him. And then lastly is our councilman at large in the person of Mr. Isaiah Thomas. So I'm so glad to have you all. And I want you all to introduce yourself and tell your story. And as you do that, I would really like for you to tell your story in the context of thinking about this question as far as what is your role? What role do you play in the entrepreneurial ecosystem? How are you contributing? How are you navigating as a ecosystem contributor, entrepreneur ecosystem contributor? So take it away, Ann, Earl, either one.
I'll let the legend go first. Mr. Earl, if you don't mind.
The legend. How are we developing an ecosystem entrepreneur? How are you contributing, sir?
Well, thank you everyone for this opportunity. Always great to connect with like-minded folks that are trying to make a difference in the community and looking for new solutions and how we can do things better. I'm a publisher of the Black Professionals News. We've been publishing now for 20 years. And our newspaper is dedicated to supporting the small business community. We're the only publication in Philadelphia that focuses on the small business community. We don't do general news. We don't cover crime and all that kind of stuff. We really focus just on news and professional development. So that has been my space for the last 20 years. And I've had the opportunity to work with just literally hundreds and hundreds of small businesses over that 20-year period, but also to work with the service providers. We wanted our newspaper to be a liaison for the service provider community and the small businesses. So they'd have a place to interact, share information, just really get a sense of what's out there so that they can support each other. Most of the businesses in my network are micro businesses, less than 5 employees. And they are really the backbone of the neighborhoods. When you go along our business districts in our community, most of those small retail stores have less than 5 employees. So that's always been our target audience. We know that there are businesses within our community that go from side hustles and vendors and all the way up to multi-million-dollar companies that are minority certified and can handle larger contracts. So we have a plethora of businesses that are in our community. And our newspaper has always served as a platform just to provide that kind of interaction and engagement. So we have claimed that space. Thank you all for calling me a legend, but I think I was in that space before anybody even recognized or really kind of paid attention to what micro businesses are doing. They are so important to the ecosystem, and they really go so unnoticed. You know, they are so far below the radar, sometimes they don't even have a blip. But, for those of us who have experience, and we like to experience micro businesses because we understand what the concept is and what they bring to the table and what they can provide. We all know what that experience is like. Yeah. And I'm sure we can all name micro businesses that we do business with, that we love, and have supported for years. have a long-standing relationship with them, and we value what they do. We value who they are, and we appreciate them just being there. So in this particular time, we have noticed that particular segment of business is really suffering. And I've taken the liberty with a lot of my associates, including Tanya and including Ann, to put together some committees where we can come up with solutions to really address those businesses, because they have been really struggling, as we know. A lot of them didn't qualify for some of the protection programs and financial programs that are out there, and they really, really took it on the chin. So we have been very proactive in that regard. I thank them, okay, for working with me. And well, we're going to come out of this thing, but only way we're going to come out is if we come out together, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Earl. Miss Ann, tell us why you are contributing to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm the president of the 63rd Street Business Association. So when this crisis happened, we were calling each other just to see how we were making out, and different grants was rolling out. And unfortunately, a lot of us were getting denied, and we were there to encourage each other. But being as though I'm a hairstylist, I know a lot of stylists and barbers, and I know that we're artists and not business-minded, like some of my friends that own daycares and different restaurants. They're more astute, in the lack of better words. So when I started reaching out to a lot of the barbers and stylists, they were really going through depression, frustrated that they couldn't get their paperwork in order. So I kind of took the lead, so to speak, because I'm the president of the association. I knew a lot of people that could help assist us as barbers and stylists. And so after that, after working with so many of them, it turned out, we started out with 5 or 6 stylists, and then it led up into 160 barbers and stylists in the city of Philadelphia, just needing each other's support. And so now that the PA grant came out, a lot of us have been in a position to qualify, because a lot of us needed help with our paperwork. And with the PPP and the different things like unemployment, if you're not really good at that, again, we're artists, it became a real challenge. So I think us working together was what I contributed to the ecosystem, to see so many of us get the grant. And then additional grant dollars coming down the pipe, like the 30-day fund. We kind of do mass text to let people know about the different grants that's coming out and what are the criteria, so we'll be prepared and to assist. So I thank God for Mr. Earl. He did the resource book and the guide. And I'm really about Black economics. Even though I'm a small mom and pop business, I'm more of a community activist. So it's kind of like, Ian, focus on your business and grow it. But a part of me is more into the community, and I really like to see unity. So I think that came across to the reason why we were able to work so well together in West Philly and even across the tri-state area.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ian, for everything that you've been doing really to keep 63rd Street alive. I know that it's been really critical for these corridors, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, these business corridors like 63rd Street and 60th Street and 52nd Street and Lancaster Avenue and Girard Avenue, and a lot of these, especially in our districts and in our communities in particular, that have been tremendously hit by this crisis. I certainly want to give time to the councilman, if he's available now, to introduce himself and share his background and his contributions to the ecosystem as well. Councilman Thomas, are you available?
Yes. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Councilmember Isaiah Thomas. I am born and raised in the city of Philadelphia. I am a council member at large, newly sworn in as of January in 2020. So it's been somewhat of a roller coaster this 8 months. But you know, just listening to what happened with 160 barbers and stylists, I can only imagine the roller coaster has been for them. So thank you for allowing me to be here. I think what brings me to this space is my background. I come from a space of education. I'm product of the school district of Philadelphia, but also a HBCU grad, former HBCU professor, former teacher at an African-centered school here in the city of Philadelphia, and also founded my own nonprofit organization that predominantly serves young people of color. And so when you think about just the space of not just being an entrepreneur, but what it means to invest in yourself, outside of some of the things I'm going to go through as far as my role in the ecosystem, I hope to try to inspire young people to take risks and invest in themselves. Because again, I might not be a traditional entrepreneur, but I do think the position that I am in is an example of taking a risk and investing in yourself as well as perseverance. So thank you for allowing me to be here. I appreciate being a part of the conversation. Outside of inspiration, which is symbolic, of course, I see my role in the ecosystem as someone who first and foremost needs to listen to the issues that businesses are facing, so we know what we can advocate for. In the midst of advocating, my job is also to legislate and to create laws that puts us in a position where we can allocate resources to help those businesses. I see my office as a resource and a vehicle to help with the processes. Someone spoke before me and talked about how often we find these hurdles that exist when trying to get some level of support from government. And so we see ourselves as a small member of that support system that exists as far as the ecosystem. And then last but not least, I see myself as someone who's supposed to promote, invest in, and solicit those businesses as well too. So that is how I see myself in this entire ecosystem. I appreciate being a part of this conversation, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Councilman. I really appreciate everything that you've said thus far. And I want to go back to something that that Ann said as far as the support that we find in the corridor and the resources that have been available, and how so many of the businesses have not initially were not available, were not able to take full advantage of those things. And to kind of tie it into what the councilman has said, what is the role of government in the ecosystem? What role, and you use the word that I think that EARL has been talking to us about during our Black call, you use the word solicit as far as the businesses. And when we look at the fact that less than that 2.5% of businesses in the city of Philadelphia are doing business with the city of Philadelphia, that's a rather stark number when you consider the population of African Americans in our city. So let's talk for a minute about what the role of government is in building the entrepreneurial ecosystem, specifically in the city of Philadelphia. And anyone can start with that, EARL and or the councilman.
Well, we have a city that's 44% Black. And we have a city which is called, minority, which is the weirdest word in the world, but that's what it's called, okay? Which means that the minority population exceeds the white population in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So that being said, what the small business owners have always asked for is just the opportunity to supply products and services to the city that we're paying taxes in. And we don't think that's an unusual request. And if you look at how the contracting is set up, particularly on the city side, small businesses have to get certified, which is okay, it's part of the process. But then, now we're all included under diversity umbrella, which is fine, that's part of the process also. But every time the diversity umbrella gets expanded, each segment settles for a smaller piece, so it's a good thing to have inclusion. But if you're going to have inclusion, how about making the pie a little bit bigger? Okay, so everybody can get an equal share. And, so we look to our elected officials to advocate on our behalf. When there are contracts that are coming out, there's certain thresholds that micro businesses can't qualify for because they don't have the capacity. So, we look for our civic leaders to come up with innovative solutions to make it more, make the participation opportunity a little bit higher. So how can we bundle contracts per se, so a smaller business can partner with a larger business and be able to qualify for a contract? It has to be creative. But so many times smaller businesses are punished because they don't have the scale or the capital, when there can be ways, creative ways, for people to come together and just sit around the table and figure out how it can work for everybody. And that's what we look for our council people to do for us.
I think, Earl, you raise an excellent strategy, because when we look at the ecosystem and we look at building it from the standpoint of it being an economic development strategy, bundling, we hear that as it relates to our cable and our phone, but can we bundle can we bundle some businesses together and make some money? Councilman, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, absolutely. So I agree with everything that was said by Mr. Harvey. I think he's spot on And it's something that we've been advocating for in my short time in council, and it's something that we're starting to see some changes in. And so, number one, as far as contracts and resources, of course, that's our job, right? Our job as a city, as far as the biggest employer in the city of Philadelphia, is to give those opportunities to minority businesses. And so I introduced a bill last year that would change the procurement requirement in the city of Philadelphia, that would require the city of Philadelphia to have at least 50% of the contracts that the city does business with have to be Philadelphia-based businesses. That bill was not passed into law yet. It was something that was introduced last year. This fall, we will be looking to amend the bill and dissect the bill in the way that we see fit to put us in a position where, hate to use your word, Mr. Harvey, but there's a certain level of minority inclusion that's mandated in that. And I know it sounds somewhat superficial, but the truth is, if that is not there, then the contracts can be awarded to whoever essentially applies for those RFPs. And, you know, we've seen some things depending on what type of contract it is and what state we're in. Often those decisions can be an executive order. Unfortunately, again, it sounds superficial, but it's something that we're even looking at as it relates to the legislation that we have that would change the percentage of businesses that the city would allow to contract with that are outside the city of Philadelphia. We're also working with PIDC for the Restart Philadelphia program. I'm pretty sure the people on this call already know about the program, but for those who might be listening that don't know about the program, PIDC is committed to give at least 50% of the revenue that it essentially puts out over the next year to help restart Philadelphia, specifically for Black businesses. And so that is a commitment that we've never seen before. Clearly it's not enough because we know that there are still businesses that are suffering out there. But I just want people to also remember that it's different levels as it relates to representation of government. So on the municipal level, we really don't have many resources to disperse directly to businesses. We can advocate for certain programs. PIDC is a collaboration between city and state, so it puts us in a position where that bridge is there as it relates to where those dollars come from. But I talked earlier about advocacy, and you know, one of the things that we want to work with our state partners with, my office specifically, and we would love to have the support of this people on this call, is regulatory relief. You know, our state partners can give our businesses some regulatory relief to put them in a position where they can operate a little more freely and not just generate more revenue for them, but also generate more tax dollars for the city as well as our Commonwealth. So I think, again, you're spot on with your concerns. My biggest job is to listen to those concerns and to continue to try to advocate and put ourselves in a position where government is doing its part to put us all in a position where businesses are recovering post this pandemic, but especially businesses of color.
Okay. You know, I hear you, Councilman. I worked for Cheney University's DBE Supportive Services Center for 2.5 years. And I can tell you firsthand, and that what we primarily did was help businesses, primarily getting government contracts, specifically with PennDOT. And I can tell you firsthand, I can count the number of times that I went to meet with a white female contractor and her husband sat over in the corner giving her signals and, you know, doing whatever that they can do. So the definition of minority and diversity, as Earl said, is problematic.
Absolutely. Not to cut you off.
Yes.
So when we're talking about PIDC, we're saying Black, not minority, not diversity. Okay. So there are times where we have to have minority inclusion in the law, right? Yes. But then there are other times where we're allocating resources and we're saying Black. So, you know, legally, to the best of our ability, where we can support Black businesses, we will say that, and we're not afraid to say that at all. But again, I talked about that promotion and the advocacy side. One of the other initiatives that came out of our office is the Black Business Crawl. And before we leave, I definitely would want to talk about that and the way that we want to be supportive of Black businesses in the past, that we've been supportive in the past, and how we want to be supportive moving forward. So I definitely understand what you're saying. I recognize that concern, but please note that we're not afraid to say Black. I'll even talk about the Black stimulus that Councilmember Sanchez introduced as well too. Finish the call. So I'll put an action on both of those. Sorry about that.
Ann or Earl, you want to respond to anything that the councilman said before I get to my next question?
Yeah, so I've been working with PIDC. I just think the follow through has to be there. They have to be consistent, because in the past, they've been saying we're going to do this for minority-owned businesses. And for some reason, the paperwork gets jammed up and the process takes a lot longer. And a large number of minority-owned businesses do not get the product that they initially start out with. So just moving forward, if PIDC is committed to really supporting small micro businesses, then just make sure the follow through is what they say it's going to be.
And we hate to add another level to that process, but unfortunately, we ask people to kind of reach out to our offices, especially when Black-owned businesses, so we can kind of keep track of our own numbers as it relates to who's applying and who's getting approved. Right? There's no way we'll know everyone who applied and everyone who gets approved and denied, but we can find patterns. And so the more people that are communicating to us as members of council, the better off we are. So we know who's applying, who's getting approved, and who's getting denied. Unfortunately, there's no central hub. You know, you guys did an amazing job. I did one call with the barbers and beauticians across the city of Philadelphia. It actually was bigger than Philadelphia. It was maybe southeastern Pennsylvania. And the call I was on, I'm assuming you're talking about the same one. You guys did an amazing job creating a space for people in that specific profession to be able to convene. When you talk about Black businesses in the city of Philadelphia, unfortunately, there's not that space where people can convene that everybody agrees is a central location. I know we have the African American Chamber of Commerce, but the reality is, and this is no knock on them, a lot of businesses that are Black owned in Philadelphia don't choose to be a member of the African American Chamber of Commerce. So how do we facilitate and hold these type of conversations where it's like, look, this is what I'm applying for. This is the status of my entity. And, you know, we just want you to know as elected officials so that you recognize that, no, when they say, you know, not a lot of Black businesses applied, that's not the case, because we have a list of 23 Black businesses that were essentially denied. But if I don't have that data that I can go to where I know, look, these are 25 Black businesses who contacted me directly, who said they was applying for support from PIDC or any city related organization, it makes it difficult for us to hold them accountable. Because I could say, well, you didn't give contracts to Black folks, and they'll say, well, Black folks didn't apply. And if I can't go directly to that list of people who were essentially denied, it puts us in a tough position to have a robust conversation. So again, I know it's another layer to add to things, but my office is more than prepared to be able to have those conversations and advocate on behalf of those Black businesses.
Well, Councilman, thank you, first of all, for that. And thank you for your pub crawls. I was watching you on social media as you were participating in your own Buy Black program. And I appreciate your efforts in that regard. Matter of fact, I sent you my family business, the Platinum Grill, to add to your list. And hopefully.
Y'all doing good. We go there all the time. I'm in the 10th Ward. We up there for the fish fry all the time. Y'all doing good. You guys are a gym in the northwest section of the city of Philadelphia. Absolutely.
Thank you. We appreciate that. A couple of comments. Legislation and advocacy of our elected officials is super important. Councilman Derek Green has been really responsive to the needs of Black-owned businesses. He attends a lot of sessions that we produce, and he's a speaker, and he lets us know what's going on the inside. And when he's about to draft legislation, he will reach out to us and let us know what he is doing. And one of the things that he was really focusing on the last couple of years was lowering the threshold of purchasing so that micro businesses can have an opportunity to purchase on a contract without being lost in the huge contracts. In other words, if we don't qualify for $1 million contract or $500,000, he wanted that bar lowered to maybe 100,000 on some contracts that could just be signed off on without having to go through a rigorous bid process and a whole bunch of paperwork that Miss Ann knows makes it so arduous for so many small businesses to even get in it, an opportunity in the procurement cycle. So, you know, you all do have the opportunity, when you're really being mindful and listening to the needs of the businesses that you represent, to put forth the kind of legislation that can kind of like even the playing field just a little bit. As a micro business owner myself, $100,000 contract to me is like a $500,000 contract to someone else. So it's a matter of scale.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's good. And also to help you out, you mentioned the African American Chamber, and I took the liberty in March when the COVID situation really began to organize the Black business community. I've been in that community for the last 20 plus years, and I brought together 15 to 20 service providers that I have under one umbrella now called the Black Business Leadership Coalition. So what that's going to enable you to do, when you need your reporting done, you're going to be able to come to our organization and you can get the information from about 20 different organizations that are in our coalition instead of you having to piecemeal them one at a time.
You said it was Black Business Leadership
Coalition. I'm the chairman of the coalition. Okay. So we wanted to make it easy from a resource standpoint because we knew that the whole playing field was about to get very fragmented due to the COVID situation. Absolutely. And I didn't want information just flowing all over the place. So I chose to centralize the information. And by bringing it all under one umbrella, we can disseminate it through all of our distribution channels to make sure that we're staying on message. The information is current because you know the information is changing by the week.
Absolutely.
By the week. Mm-hmm. So we had to make sure that by us coming together under one umbrella, we could filter all this information into our channels and make sure it was reaching down to the grassroots level. So we would love to work with you as you put together your strategy to let you know that we're here as a resource for you to make your job easier. Okay, so you don't have to run around trying to find everybody. We have them all in one place.
So, thank you so much, Earl and Councilman Tom, because I want to make sure that we get some questions. People are hitting me in the chat, and I want the council.
Can I reply to that real quick though? That was great. Yeah, just real quick, 30 seconds. First of all, Councilman Green, I agree with you 100%. He's phenomenal. He's somebody who I've been learning from as a newer member of council and him and his leadership. So I agree 100%. His advocacy for Black businesses is something that's, you know, I try to match it, but it's definitely unmatched. With that being said, I do actually make it a policy to introduce legislation to stakeholders before I introduce it to law. So, Mr. Harvey, I will 100% take you up on that offer for the coalition that you're talking about. We definitely make that a regular practice before any legislation is introduced. So you have my word on that. And I would love to follow up with you in the coalition after this call is over. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, Ms. Morris.
That's okay. Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. But I don't want the councilman to think that we're only here to beat up on the city of Philadelphia. So I want to ask some other questions. So one question is, we've seen during this time that we've been in between COVID and then the civil unrest as well, we've seen a lot of declarations and promises of giving and contributing to Black businesses. So my question is, how do we hold these pledges and these businesses that have made promises to support Black businesses and these individuals to support Black businesses during this time? How do we hold them accountable? So that's I want to put that out there next. And I'm gonna open up the microphones in a minute so we can start getting some feedback from some of our other folks that are on the line, because Tracy's here. My Black Girl Ventures sisters are here as well. And so I want everyone that wants to contribute to have an opportunity to do that. But I think it's important that we have that conversation because I want this to be solution oriented. How do we hold folks accountable that have pledged to do business with Black businesses?
Well, we have to organize ourselves first. And that's why it's important for us to utilize the organizations that we have in place, like the African American Chamber. Ann has done a wonderful job organizing her trade into an association. Okay, I'm hoping that they formalize it at some point and start paying dues.
Yes, we have. But I want to say what she was saying as far as holding them accountable. I think you have to give them the proposal, what we suggested and what they offer, and then the follow through. I think one of the hardest things when we have to confront, I wouldn't say a bully, but for lack of better words, the bigger businesses receive a lot of incentives and we don't as mom and pop businesses. We get denied loans, grants, and they are awarded different opportunities as well as free staffing. So I think showing them that we really do need your support if you want us to be viable, because small businesses help big businesses. So I think that's the part that we need to focus on, holding them accountable, but really lovingly saying we're partners. You know, we have to work in this together if we want to come out of this on top.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Earl.
Yeah, well, you know, a lot of us observed after the George Floyd murder that a lot of the Fortune 500 companies responded the way they normally do, which is through advertising and commercials to show their commitment to the community. One of the standard playbooks for those of us who have been around business long enough to know is that whenever there's a major incident or crisis, a lot of corporations tend to want to make a donation to put a Band-Aid on the solution to show their commitment. We're going to donate to Black Lives Matter. We're going to donate to the NAACP or the Urban League. And these are all wonderful organizations, and they're all doing wonderful things. So we're not knocking that. But that tends to be a one-off solution where they'll write a check and then they'll go back to business as usual in regards to providing a total solution to the situation. So I've been advocating that instead of just writing a check and making a donation, you can do that too, but let's do a forensic on what the problem is. What's causing a lot of this? Let's get to the base of that. There's a lot of disenfranchisement going on. There's a lot of overt systemic racism, okay? There are all kinds of things that are leading to this environment that we're in. And I want to drill down on that. Let's get to where that is. Where's it coming from? What's the root cause of that? And how can we start to implement sustainable solutions? Sustainable, okay? Not just a one-off and say, hey, we did this, let's pat ourselves on the back and let's keep moving. So how do we hold them accountable? Well, we have the power of social media now. We can put people on blast now. We didn't have that before. We had to write letters to the board and write letters to the CEO, which ended up in the trash can. But now, oh, we can go to your Facebook page, your Instagram page, or whatever you're doing, your Twitter page, and we can blow you up, literally. So we have to use the tools that we have now for advocacy, and not just advocacy. Let's use them for enforcement. Enforcement. Let's take a page out of their book and say, if this is how you all are going to operate, we're going to let you know that we're watching you. We're watching you. And we have the opportunity to speak not just with our pen and our keyboard, but with our dollars as well. We can boycott you. We cannot buy from you, and we can encourage others to do so. That's how we hold them accountable. That's one way to do it. And we can discuss other solutions on this call today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Earl, as far as accountability. One of our BGV partners in Birmingham, Alabama did just that. She actually created a social media campaign of everyone in that area that made promises, created an Airtable. For those of you that may not be familiar with Airtable, it's kind of like Basecamp or, you know, some other one of those project management kind of platforms. And then tied in what Ann said, created proposals for each one of them and sent them out and said, hey, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And submitted proposals and has been getting responses. And I think organizing and advocating is one way that we can do that. And just to tie in what Earl was saying is that we need to, you know, what campaign can we create? We have the councilman here. We have some other folks, some small businesses on the line. We have Black Girl Ventures present. What campaigns can we create to really, you know, get in folks' face, you know, instead of taking the social media when we have an issue, when something breaks or when a flight is late. You know what I'm saying? We good with that, but we, you know, this is monumental where we are right now. So I want to really kind of shift to talking about some solutions in this ecosystem as far as the accountability and how do we make this ecosystem a really building this ecosystem, this entrepreneur ecosystem, how do we make building it an economic strategy? That's the part that I don't really see. I don't really see that the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Philadelphia is viewed or treated as a strategy when we talk about building Black wealth. So I just want to put that, I want to just put that out there, how we developing an inclusive ecosystem that supports Black and brown entrepreneurs, and how do we move from concept to practice?
Well, it has to be intentional. That's number one. It has to be intentional. People have to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take public and private partnerships.
Yep.
It's going to take everybody realizing where they can fit into this ecosystem and on what level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be easy, because we're talking 150 years of systemic disenfranchisement.
Mm.
So folks are going to have to re-educate themselves on how to do things differently. See, and they think it's a zero-sum game. They think, well, you know, I'm not going, if I got to give up something to get something, then, you know, that's not going to work for me. You have to give up something.
You have to give up something.
There's no other way around it. For someone who has, you know, 90% of a contract, and now they're being told that, you know, you're going to have to give up 20% of your contract to a minority-owned business. Well, that cuts into their profit, it cuts into their shareholders, it cuts into all the things that they're used to adding and padding, that cuts into that.
Mm.
So that has to be an intentional decision that they're going to make. It also has to be legislative decisions as well, because our elected officials have the right and the responsibility to not just ask, but as Garry put in the chat, to demand.
That's right.
Oh, you don't want 80% of this contract? You don't want to give up 20? Well, you're not going to get none. How you like that as a strategy? Now you figure that out and you get back to us. See, that's what I'm talking about. Power concedes nothing without a demand.
Mm.
Now, I'm the eternal optimist. I believe that every problem has a solution. It absolutely can be done. But it's going to take everybody on this Zoom today to become a strategic partner in the solution. This is not a spectator sport. And as long as Black people were crying, Black Lives Matter, it fell on deaf ears. The minute the white community and other diverse groups joined the Black Lives Matter movement, the moment it became a movement.
Mm.
And that's what it takes. And we've seen protesters having police turn on them, who might have thought in their lifetime they would never be assaulted by the police because that wasn't part of their experience.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's part of their experience.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I got hit with a rubber bullet. I got hit with a billy club. Wait a minute, that's not part of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is now. So we want to ask everybody to get involved.
Yes.
If you care about this country and care about the situation, care about what's going on, let's get in and mix it up. It's going to take all of us to come up with a solution, and it can't be looked at as just a Black thing, because that's not going to work.
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So I'm gonna ask my ambassador, if he's still here, to open up the mic. We got about 15 minutes to Jake. If you want to take everybody off mute so we can engage some other folks, because Gary's been in the chat and Kenny's been in the chat, Tiara's been in the chat. And so I just want to, piggyback and just go a little bit deeper, because when I think about the ecosystem, to me, it has a couple different areas, right? It has human capital, social capital, financial capital, infrastructure, which is in policy. All of those things have to be working together. Like Earl was talking about, they have to be working together if this is going to be effective. It's not a spectator sport. All of those things have to be working together if we are going to create Black wealth, if we are going to move this, because at the end of the day, wealth, poverty it's all connected. It's all the crime, all of it. It's all connected. So all these things have to be working together. So how do we get all of these things working together? We've got the councilman here, we've got I Black here, we've got the Science Center here. And so I want to open up, for some for some people to contribute as well as to ask any questions. So let's have at it.
All right, yes. Anyone who wants to get involved, you now have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you're unfamiliar with how to do that, just scroll to the bottom left of the video screen and you'll see the mute button. So you'll see the option to unmute yourself there.
And we have Louisa St. Bartholomew Brown Morgan, who is on the way from the UK joining us and been in the chat talking about the similarities of what's going on over there. So this is pretty amazing. So any questions for any of our panelists? Oh, y'all quiet now. Oh, y'all quiet now. Okay. Okay, Charlie, go ahead. Science Center said we can't unmute.
I'm not sure why that's the case.
It's like Earl and Ann are on mute now too.
Okay, there we are. This is Louisa here. Let me put you so that you can see what I'm like just before I go to bed. This is me kneeling down and listening to this wonderful conversation. It is sad that George Floyd became a sacrificial lamb
Oh God.
for the whole world. I wish you guys were here in the UK to see the reaction. I'm a Black 69-year-old woman, and I would never, if anybody has said that the movement that took place would happen, just like when Obama became president, I would have sworn blind that no, never. Because even in the UK, it just spread across Europe, even as far as Moscow. And in Germany, they're holding webinars about microaggression, Black Lives Matters, all this. So for me, George Floyd, bless him, may his soul rest forever in eternal peace, was our sacrificial lamb. And I keep saying, because I'm a great reader of African American history, because I am half Ghanaian, half Nigerian, born in London, but I also grew up in Africa. And I know a lot of African Americans are going back to Ghana. But I follow your history, I follow African American history very thoroughly, because a lot of those slaves were shipped out from Cape Coast, which is where I come from Elmina Castle and Cape Coast Castle. So I follow the history. And in 1921, there was a massacre. My grandfather kept saying that they heard it in Nigeria of African Americans because they were an affluent trading in a community, Black community. And the white people were jealous of them and set about destroying. They even had the national, read the history. And we can do it. You can do it. We're doing it here in the UK. Tuesday is a dedicated Black Tuesday to buy from only Black shops. And on Sundays, on Sundays, we light a candle and kneel in front of our houses for George. That's what we do here. And Black communities can be successful. If any of you get a chance, you come to the UK, you go to Brixton, all these places where Black communities, all of them are thriving because we stood our ground. We've had our riots. We've had Toxted in the north of England. We've had Brixton. Luckily, we've never had it here in Wales, in Cardiff, where we've never. But we should not be struggling. Our children, I'll become a grandmother next month or next week. I don't want to see my grandchild struggling, carrying on the struggles that we are having now. It should end. It should stop. We were all made in the image and likeness of God the Father and the Creator. So who are you to tell me that because I'm Black, I'm an irrelevant person? We are all human. There is only one race, and that's the human race. And regardless of color, we all have to live together. This nonsense has got to stop. This microaggression against Black people has got to stop. It has to end, now. And now we've started, we should not sleep. We should let it carry on. Please forgive me. I thought I'll stay a bit and speak to you all.
Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you so much. It was so beautiful and passionate. I thank you so much. Anybody else want to ask a question of our panelists? Gary, I know you've been in the chat. You have anything you want to add or ask? Thank you so much. Louisa's got us fired up now.
So I'm off to bed now. I'm off to bed. Love you all. Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Chat.
Gary said he's muted.
There we go. Thank you. No, I feel like that was a drop the mic type of moment. I don't think I can follow that at all. But the only thing I would say, Tanya, just building off of what you were sort of describing, was that ecosystem, and everything interacts and intersects and either contributes or takes from the ecosystem. And I think if we really assess, who contributes more, who is more of a taker in the ecosystem, we'll get a good idea and understanding of what's really going on. But to really have a healthy and sustainable ecosystem, everyone is equally contributing. I think of I was watching The Lion King, so I think about the circle of life and how everything, is intersected and related to one another. So I think we might need to have another conversation where we really talk and get down and dirty into the strategy. Yeah. But just like you said, it can't just be business owners collaborating with business owners and policymakers collaborating with policymakers. It's that intersection between them. And it's not just Philadelphia, it's cities and neighborhoods outside of Philadelphia. It's Pennsylvania and Delaware. And it's at this point, as Earl was describing with technology, we're all connected.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thank you so much. I know Charlie wanted to get in. Looks like he's still muted, but I wanted to try to give him an opportunity. Looks like some folks are still muted before I let the councilman. Charlie's still saying he can't unmute yet, but I wanted to let the councilman close this out. And Earl, do you have any last remarks before we wrap up? Or anyone else that wants to give some closing remarks? Thank you again. And I definitely, as I said, this month's theme was systems. And so that was what really led me to talk about the ecosystem. Next month is resilience. And as we prepare to carefully start into this next normal, we don't say new normal, we say the next normal. I'd like for us to continue this conversation when we talk a little bit more, to Gary's point, and drill down into this conversation. So I'm gonna let Charlie have a few minutes, then I'm gonna have Ann and Earl and the councilman wrap us up.
All right, yeah, like everyone, great topics, great conversation. I just wanted to, I guess, touch upon and emphasize, certain things like me and Tanya have actually talked about some of this stuff, previously in other sessions, talked about specific things that kind of blew up in the chat box, of course, but yeah, no, to tie both this session and actually the session right before this one, it was it was about like how to connect with your elected officials, your elected legislatures in particular, be that subject matter expert. You know, it reminded me of like, you know, just, you know, we kind of have to like, you know, one of the things that she said was to kind of just be in contact with your elected officials, you know, as often as possible. Like, let's say in the government contracting case, you know, like, especially when there are so many horror stories of the contracts gone wrong, and, you know, contracts gone wrong in, you know, not just in the bidding process with the whole certifications all, but even just while you're executing the contract, you know, actually holding, let's say, your prime contractor or even just the agency that's you know, administering it accountable to make sure that you're being treated fairly, because a lot of horror stories came from that. There's even and even on the systemic racism part, just the whole like there's actually a name and even in the federal space where she got she got like demoted, and then I think just she got you know fired for just like, you know, for being her. Her name's Bunny Greenhouse. You might want to look her up. It was like a very long, protracted lawsuit, and that was basically systemic racism. So I guess, you know, just to keep in mind, like, it's not just about, you know, empowering all of us to, you know, hold conversations and you know, across the board and everything, but that whole accountability segment where, you know, where we not just talk about, you know, contacting legislatures and people like that, but also to keep them and even the executive branch who are actually executing those contracts and such, them accountable in the treatment. Because I know from our conversation with you, Tanya, like you had to get out of that space because of just, you got sick of all the poor treatment and it was wearing on you. So the whole accountability thing, we have to keep pushing on that front, whichever angle it might be. So that's really the comment.
Thank you, Charlie. Tiara?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to pick up on something that Garry mentioned in terms of the effort has to go beyond getting businesses together. I've been in the workforce for many years, and I decided to go back to school recently. And one of my classes is focused on the global political economy, and my professor asked, you know, who's the most influential actor around the globe? And, you know, I think, at least from a U.S. perspective, we are quick to jump and say the U.S., right? And to put some context to this, actors don't have to be states. It could be Bill Gates, it could be Mark Zuckerberg, it could be the US. And so everybody threw out all these different names. And he said, and this is a somewhat of an opinion, but he said the most influential actor in the globe is the consumer. And so I just wanted to touch on that because I really believe that we have a much greater power than each of us realize, and that power has to be harnessed and it has to be collective. But it, you know, if you think about where your money goes, that's a powerful mechanism.
Yes, yes.
And so each of us holds the power, as Louise said, to put our dollar wherever we want to put it. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that the change, it is cliche, but I really believe the change starts with each of us. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing you can just do tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so I do think a strategy is necessary. But I do believe that there's so much strength in the consumer that we can bend the world however we want. But do we know that we can do that? Mm. So, thank you.
That's good stuff, Tiara. And I would agree that the most powerful actor is the consumer. I won't get Earl started talking about the time, how fast the black dollar circulates in the black community, because that'll take us another hour. Right. So, and Earl, you want to have some last remarks before we wrap up?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everybody. I wish we had a chance to hear a comment from everybody on this Zoom today, because everybody has value
That's right.
And we value everyone's opinion. And you were offered the opportunity to unmute, and some folks didn't. So, you know, if we continue this conversation again, let's make it way more interactive, because I want to hear what everybody has to say. But I also want everybody to do a little self-reflection in this time that we're in right now. We hear a lot about white privilege. Okay, well, what exactly is that? And am I benefiting? You can ask yourself, especially our white brothers and sisters, are you benefiting from that? You know, is it something that you take for granted? And if you're using that as part of the problem, then maybe you can turn that around and be part of the solution too. Okay? Somebody put in the chat, you know, how can Venture Cafe help? Well, we can all ask ourselves that question. How can I help? What can I do to make a difference? And Venture Cafe has been gracious enough to have this platform for us, and we asked them to have this platform again. Okay? Let's make all these platforms available for this kind of dialogue, because conversation is going to lead to activism. It's going to lead to action. And that's what it's going to take. So for those of you all who are trying to figure this whole thing out, I want you to understand one thing before I leave. In many ways, we're all in this boat together. This country was set up by white male landowners. They're the ones who decided the direction this country was going to go in. And that didn't include white females. That didn't include anybody of color. It included white male landowners. So if you're not a white male landowner on this call, and you don't have 50 to 100 million acres or a Fortune 500 company, if you're not in the 1%, let's be clear. If you're not in the 1%, and that's who they were, the 1%ers back then.
That's right.
Then we're all in this together. All in this together.
That's right.
We have to look at this intersection of race and class right now, because that's the elephant in the room that is not being discussed. And a white person who is not in the 1%, they may be able to get by on white privilege, but you take that white privilege up to the 1% and they'll tell you exactly where you are and who you are. You are not one of them. And they'll remind you of that real quick. So I think we need to focus more on the things that we have in common instead of the things that separate us. And we'll be able to come to difference and make transformative change within our community.
Yes, sir, Mr. Harvey. And she can't, she's on mute. Jake doesn't know what's going on.
Okay, I think.
There we go.
Okay. I want to thank you so much. This has been a blessing to me. Earl, you hit a spot on like you always do. I think us being more conscious, reading more, you know, researching more, and actually being proactive. Like, don't be on the sidelines listening to hearsay. Get involved, get engaged. One of the things that I'm noticing that a large number of people are not interested in voting. And I have to really share with my Black counterparts what our ancestors fought for. So that's another charge that we have to really discuss before November election. So, you know, it hurts when you see so much unrest in our communities and you don't see enough engagement across the aisle, you know. So I'm thankful that you reached out, and I'm so blessed to see that we're doing this. You know, I think change is needed, and all of our like-mindeds is going to make the world a lot better than what it is right now. So thank you.
Thank you. And is the councilman still around? I wanted to let him close us out. If not, maybe Tracy can. Oh, there's the councilman. Come on, sir.
I don't like camera, you know, so if I'm not talking, I tend to cut that camera off. Yeah, you know, I'm glad I'm not the only one. Zoom teaches you a lot about people's personalities. I'll just say thank you. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the conversation. I know that I have a few marching orders. Number one, I spoke briefly about the Black Business Crawl. That's something that we are going to be bringing back, definitely. We're not sure exactly when, but we know that there is going to be a time later this year where a lot of people will be spending a lot of money on gifts and things of that nature. And so we want to make sure that as we close the calendar year out, that there's still some momentum, right? There's a lot of momentum right now, but we know a lot of times that stuff dies down. The other thing, while I'm listening and just trying to actively listen, I just looked up some of the bigger businesses in the city of Philadelphia. I love the idea of putting pressure on the big businesses in the city. We all put pressure on Comcast, all right, but who are them other big companies in the city of Philadelphia what verbal commitments have they made, and what does the follow-up look like? So if there's any movement or work around that, you can feel free to reach out to my office. We'll be extremely supportive as it relates to that. And of course, last but not least, anybody who's looking to get city contracts or city support, please let us know how we can be supportive of you. Even if you don't need support, just let us know what you're applying for, so we know that you've applied, so we can kind of help monitor the process, so we can ensure that things are done in a fair and equitable way. So again, I thank you for this conversation. I put all my contact information in the chat feature so folks can email me directly. I also put my social media information in the chat feature. So if folks want to follow my office, we actually have a page that's dedicated to Instagram page. I'm sorry, we're getting better with other stuff, but you know, the young people love Instagram. We got an Instagram page that's specifically dedicated to city jobs, jobs in general, not just city jobs, but jobs, city contracts, and resources and things of that capacity. And that's just simply Councilman Thomas Jobs and Resources. That's the name of the page on Instagram. So anything else that we should be doing, anything else that we should be thinking about, any situations that businesses might be facing that we're not necessarily aware of, please communicate that information to us. We need to hear from you. We need to know what can we be doing better on our end to support you, because we know you're struggling now. We know it's going to get a little darker before it get light, but we're anticipating that, and we're doing our best to provide support so that we can all get through this pandemic, this economic crisis, and be better on the other side of it. So again, thank you for inviting me to the conversation. Please use my office as a resource, and most importantly, please hold me accountable to the things I'm saying today.
Thank you so much, Councilman. I really, really appreciate you coming on and contributing to this conversation. As I said, I've been working with the Venture Café for a little over a year now, and I'm really grateful to Tracy and Natalie and Jen was here before that, and Garry as well, to be a part of this community and having this opportunity to share and giving us this platform. I see that my good friend and partner Jabari Jones has checked in. I didn't know how much of the conversation he got to partake in, but I certainly would not go without giving him an opportunity to have some remarks as we wrap this up. And again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank my BGV folks for tuning in, Tiara and Nefertari and Tracy, and those of you that have contributed. Thank you so much. Jabari is just somebody, and when I saw he wasn't on earlier, I said, I know he's somewhere in the streets.
Yeah, you know.
So I never worry, because I know how he works. He's on the ground. So Jabari, I don't know how much of the conversation you got to hear, but I wanted to certainly give you an opportunity to share something before we close out.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. I appreciate it. And I just want to say thank you and to Venture Café for curating just another really great conversation. This is a hard time for a lot of businesses. It's a hard time for a lot of people that have been watching some of the things that have been happening in the news lately. And these are things that have been happening for a lot longer than that. It's just that they're on the forefront of many people's minds recently. And, I guess one of the good things about that is it's inspired conversations like these. Conversations with diverse people that may not have been a part of that conversation previously, that have been watching some of the things that have been happening and saying, hey, you know what, something's got to change. How can we do better? How can we figure out ways that we can help? I love some of the comments that I did hear about, pressuring larger businesses and larger entities to also participate and see what it is that they can do, what they can contribute, into this process. And I think also just the other thing, I think, to wrap up some of the points that Earl made, about being a little bit more conscious where everybody spends their money. I mean, that's one of the best ways as an individual that's on this call who says, I'm not an advocate, or I'm not an activist, or I don't have a, large company or a business or large spend. But, we all make conscious decisions every day in terms of where we decide to spend our dollars, and those small purchases, like, where you go buy your lunch, where you go to dinner, the type of plate, where you get your hardware from, making that conscious decision to say, hey, maybe I want to go to a community Black-owned small business or a diverse business that's in my neighborhood rather than going to Lowe's or Walmart. That small purchase and those small transactions can make a big difference for small businesses, especially in the era of COVID now, where everything's struggling. So I want to thank everybody, for joining. Thanks for giving me the shout out, Tanya. And you're right, I was out in the streets today. We had a lot of we got some flood damage in Southwest Philly that's not looking too good. But I want to thank my good friend Earl. I mean, I know he's been working diligently for months on a great initiative, and I'm sure he got a chance to get into it, man. But it's gonna be some game-changing stuff. Of course, the Councilman Thomas, and I know he's doing a lot of great work, not only with advocating for small businesses, but also trying to come up with some of the root causes of some of the violence that's ripped apart our neighborhoods recently. And I see also President Ann Turner over there. I'm sure I didn't get a chance to see some of her remarks, but I know enough about Ann, and I know she kept it real. And that's all it is. So this was a great group, it looks like. And yeah, glad that I was able to at least catch some of it before you guys signed off here.
So thank you so much, Jabari. So I want to thank you all again, Earl and Councilman Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, the theme this month was systems. And so we're going to continue this conversation because next month is resilience. And I think now, as we begin to turn this corner prayerfully, in September could be a really pivotal time for us to really talk about how Black businesses in particular have been resilient through this time and how we can continue to help them to move forward. So I just want to thank you all for this. Again,
Tanya, I have a question before you leave.
Yes, sir.
If Venture Cafe is recording this, could they maybe put this for playback on their website? And we could drive people.
I usually get the recording after I do these sessions, so I can get the recording and I can certainly share that. And I'm sure, I don't know, Tracy and Garry are still here. I don't know how else they want to share it. And Garry says absolutely, that will happen.
Yeah, if they want to post it on their site, we can drive people to their site. People don't even know about the Venture Cafe or the Science Center. If that would help create awareness about who you all are, I'll be happy to drive people to your site to help you guys get some exposure too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I was a genius. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you again.